Armenian media is distorting the real situation on the contact line. Up to 17 Armenian servicemen were killed in January, the Ministry of Defense of Azerbaijan reports. The Hill. Azerbaijan is one of the most tolerant countries. Azerbaijan joins New York Times travel show exhibition. Units of the armed forces of Armenia, which have sustained numerous casualties in the occupied Nagorno-Karabakh territory in the past days, once again resorted to an aggressive and ugly provocation due to having suffered bitter failures on the front line. The attempt by the enemy's intelligence and sabotage groups to suddenly attack the positions of the units of the Azerbaijani armed forces throughout the front line and the troops' contact line on the state border between Azerbaijan and Armenia was successfully prevented. In January, 17 Armenian servicemen were eliminated and up to 20 were wounded. The units of our armed forces showed personal courage and bravery in unequal fighting with the enemy, which exceeded them manyfold in number. 3 of our military men fell, and also the wounding of servicemen was reported while repelling the enemy's attacks. On the order of Defense Minister Colonel General Zakir Hasanov, the servicemen who were killed have been awarded with the medal posthumously. The Ministry of Defense also dismissed the Armenian media reports claiming numerous casualties on the Azerbaijani side, labeling them as a blatant lie and misinformation not reflecting the real situation on the contact line of the troops. Armenia has turned terrorism and aggressive separatism into the basis of the government policy. Chairman of the State Commission on Prisoners of War, Hostages and Missing Persons, Minister of National Security of Azerbaijan, Eldar Mahmudov, said during the Commission's meeting. The meeting participants firstly became familiar with the photo stand reflecting the activities of the State Commission, as well as the books published in various languages about the consequences of the Armenia-Azerbaijan Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, videos, booklets and other visual aids, the State Commission said. Addressing the meeting, Mahmudov spoke about the changes in the composition of the State Commission in accordance with the orders of the Azerbaijani president dated June 24, 2013 and December 22, 2014. He expressed confidence that the Commission's members will further justify the president's trust and work more intensively to fulfill the tasks set by the head of state and resolve certain strategic issues. Mahmudov said there is still much to be done to resolve the humanitarian problems that emerged as a result of Armenia's military aggression against Azerbaijan and to clarify the fate of the missing people. He added that as long as the current status quo remains, it will be impossible to completely prevent the humanitarian catastrophe. Mahmudov said this is proven by Armenia's attempts to commit provocative acts of sabotage on the contact line of Azerbaijani and Armenian armed forces throughout 2014.
International Red Cross Committee is very much involved in the people who went missing during the active phase of the Karabakh War. Today, this number is about 4,600. This is the number of all people who went missing in relation to the conflict, and about 4,200 of them are registered in Azerbaijan, said Deniz Duran, head of the ICRC delegation in Baku, in her interview with Cibc. The activity that is called clarifying the fate of the missing is not conducted active searching today due to the lack of the direct contacts. However, it is hard to answer the question how many people's fate has been clarified with the support of the ICRC. In the initial stage of the conflict, this issue was extremely chaotic. A lot of people were missing, then found and returned. In that period, about 800 citizens named missing were found and reunited with their families. For the remaining ones, that's still registered as missing is 4,200. Head of the delegation said they work closely with the State Commission on the Missing Persons in this regard.
And to do that, we embarked on a series of measures over the last years to take as much information and documentation about the missing person and about the circumstances of their disappearance, so that one day some efforts can be made to locate them or to give answers to their families if they've died, for example.
The office conducted the identification project in two phases, last of which began in the last year is collection of the biological reference sample from living relatives of those persons.
Pass away. So we felt it was important to begin to collect biological reference samples, which can be profiled into DNA samples, so that these can be matched. If one day in the future exhumations can begin and identification can happen. So we did the pilot phase in 2014, and it's a very big project. We did the first phase to test it, and we work very closely with the State Commission, of course, and we designed this together with the State Commission, and they made available, for example, the hospital of the Ministry of National Security, where the collection took place. They are storing the biological reference samples to begin in 2015 what we call the full rollout. And it is a very big project which will require us to collect biological reference samples from about 15,000 people and store them in conditions which are meeting the correct standards, so that in time they can be turned into DNA profiles. Exactly. And
Head of delegation said the office will continue its efforts to help people suffered from the results of the unresolved conflict. Hundreds of families live their daily life with the proximity of a military front line and impact of the conflict. For that purpose, the office of the ICRC delegation in Azerbaijan implements special projects for families whose homes are extremely close with the front line and exposed to shooting across the line.
And we help to redesign the house or build a protective wall around the garden of the house, so that the family, when going about its daily business, is less exposed to the shooting, which is coming from the front line.
The last but not the least, ICRC also conducts a business projects for residents of frontline areas. A business projects called cash grants. Aim of such project is to help rural families to invest money in the field that will generate an income for his family for the long period of time. All process, including selection criteria as well as follow-up of the project, is strictly conducted by the ICRC representatives, local communities and respective executive bodies. Balabey Süleymanlı, Seymur Guliyev, Cibc.
France has ratified an intergovernmental agreement on the establishment and terms of activity of the cultural centers of France and Azerbaijan. The Azerbaijani embassy in France said the cultural centers of both countries will have a legal status and will be subordinated to the embassies, the agreement says. While discussing this agreement, Thierry Mariani, MP from the 11th constituency of French citizens abroad, Jean-François Mancel, MP, chairman of the Friends of Azerbaijan Association in France, and Michel Voisin, MP, head of the France-Azerbaijan Friendship Group in the National Assembly, delivered speeches in the National Assembly. The MPs spoke about the culture and history of Azerbaijan, the country's policy on maintaining and strengthening its independence, the traditions of tolerance, secular nature, and multiculturalism dominating in the Azerbaijani society, as well as the importance of further intensifying the bilateral French-Azerbaijani cooperation in various fields, the intermediary role of France in the peaceful settlement of the Armenian-Azerbaijani Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. The MPs stressed the importance of this agreement in strengthening of the bilateral cultural relations. An agreement on signing of this treaty was reached during the Azerbaijani president's official visit to France in 2009. The U.S. newspaper The Hill, which is the most influential publication of the U.S. Congress, published an article about the high achievements of Azerbaijan in the fields of tolerance and multiculturalism. Much is made about religious tolerance in the Republic of Azerbaijan, said the author and Israel-based expert in international relations, Aryeh Gat. In 2014, the government of the Republic of Azerbaijan established two institutions that solidified the country's role as a model for ethnic and religious tolerance, the author said. The position of State Advisor on Inter-Ethnic Affairs, Multiculturalism and Religion was established and filled by prominent academician Kemal Abdullah, said Gat. He went on to add that in addition, the Baku International Center of Multiculturalism was launched, a center that immediately began to build on Baku's role in advancing intercultural dialogue and humanitarian programming. Azerbaijan, a predominantly Shiite Muslim country, is also home to several other ethnic and religious groups, including ancient Zoroastrian, Christian, and Jewish communities, the author said. Respect and tolerance tolerance for national minorities has played a vital role in the development of the country, from antiquity to the days of the Silk Road to modernity. According to the author, Azerbaijan has made a concerted effort to create and foster the necessary political and social conditions for developing and strengthening the country's traditions of multiculturalism and tolerance. The real test for Azerbaijan's tradition of religious and national tolerance was during the collapse of the Soviet Union, said the article. In this deeply troubled time, ethnic Armenians invaded some 20% of Azerbaijani lands, creating nearly 1 million Azerbaijani internally displaced persons and ethnically cleansing the remainder, the author said. Despite such a large-scale murder and displacement, the core principle of peaceful coexistence continued to define Azerbaijani society, God said. Even as violence has flared over the past more than 20 years of the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, Azerbaijani society has maintained harmony against its religions and ethnicities. He said that under the patronage of President Ilham Aliyev and the First Lady, 2 synagogues and the largest Jewish educational center in the South Caucasus were built. The ancient town of Krasnaya Sloboda in northern Azerbaijan, said to be the only old Jewish town outside of Israel, is the pride of Azerbaijan, he said. In this region, Jewish and Muslim Azerbaijanis have been living harmoniously for centuries, said God. The author also said that importantly, Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev has earned the respect of a wide swath of Israeli society for his dedication in this realm and to the Jews of Azerbaijan. The state-owned fund of Azerbaijan so far will invest $500 million in yuan assets in 2015. Meanwhile, it will continue to pursue real estate across Asian markets to diversify its portfolio, the fund's executive director Shahmar Mosumov said in his recent interview, referring to the Chinese yuan. China, as the second largest economy in the world, remains an attractive market for the growing number of foreign investors. Prospects of the Chinese yuan as an additional investment currency attract considerable interest of various categories of investors, including sovereign wealth funds. Touching upon the ruble crisis, Mosumov noted while SOFA broadens its investments, it will hold on to its ruble holdings even after the Russian currency's worst crisis since 1998. SOFA owns a 2.95% stake in VTB Bank, the second largest bank of Russia. The cost of this acquisition amounted to $500 million. Azerbaijan has responded to the plunge in oil prices by defending its currency even as economic growth slowed. Mosumov said crude prices will probably stabilize and recover in the second half of the year. Obviously, nobody expects them to come up as rapidly as it happened in 2009 and 2010, but they will come up from the levels we see right now, he said. Lower oil prices will mean SOFA's assets may shrink by about $3 billion. Mosumov went on adding that the reserves accumulated in SOFAs will help the country to ride out the difficulties. We will be able to protect our currency, he said. Although we will reduce spending, we will do so in a very controlled manner without damaging the real economy, he underscored.
A total of $2.5 billion was invested in the road and transport sector of Azerbaijan in 2014. Around $2 billion of that amount was placed in the construction of new roads and reconstruction of the existing ones. Statistical data on the development of the country's road and transport sector in the past 10 years was considered in the capital Baku during the conference entitled Application of New Technologies and Innovations in the Construction and Reconstruction of Road Infrastructure. In 2004-2014, 11,000 kilometers of roads were laid in Azerbaijan, as well as 300 bridges and road junctions built. Minister of Transport Ziya Mammadov has said. Mammadov said that overall, gross investments in the development of the road and transport sector of Azerbaijan in the past 10 years accounted for 21% of the investments made in the country's economy. In this period, 760 kilometers of roads were repaired in Baku and 70 bridges and 84 overhead and underground pedestrian crossings constructed. In the 10-year period, the bulk stock of cargo transportation increased by 5.7%, that of transshipment 3.4%, and passenger transportation 3.7%. All this work was carried out with the involvement of local and major world companies at the expense of state investments and borrowed funds.
The Prime Minister of Georgia, Irakli Garibashvili, participated in the discussion within the World Economic Summit in Davos, during which he noted the importance of the Baku-Tbilisi Coast Railway. Garibashvili informed the participants of the discussion on the topic of cross-border economic regions of Europe, with the vision of the Georgian authorities of new economic and trade routes. The economic, political, and cultural interdependence of cross-border economic regions in Europe is growing day by day. The strengthening of communication routes over large areas is crucial to the sustainable development of the region of Eurasia. The region needs fast, cheap, and reliable channels for the transport of goods from China to Europe, Garibashvili said at the meeting. According to him, from this point of view, the Baku-Tbilisi Coast Railway is highly important, as it's aimed at ensuring the direct route between Turkey and Georgia to connect Europe and Asia. After the launch of the project, the transportation of goods from China to the European market will be reduced by half. The path distance decreased by almost 7,500 kilometers. Leaders from the worlds of business, politics, and academia ended their meeting in Davos, Switzerland, the 45th annual meeting of the World Economic Forum. They had discussed and debated many of the pressing issues facing the world today, including international terrorism and security, world poverty, economic growth, and climate change. An Azerbaijani delegation is participating in the International New York Times Travel Show exhibition. Azerbaijan's 30 square meters pavilion featured presentations through special advertising, printed materials in Azerbaijan and English languages on the country's must-see places, historic cultural monuments, hotel, and tourism objects. Currently celebrating its 12th anniversary, the New York Times Travel Show is a fun and savvy way to plan your next vacation, take advantage of exclusive travel discounts, and learn more about the world's current travel hotspots from the nearly 500 exhibitors representing more than 150 countries. The event consists of the International Tourism Forum to discuss issues on the development of the tourism industry, the International Business Meeting where international sellers and buyers gather for new business opportunities, the Travel Showcase where over 150 countries and regions exhibit for the showcase, and the awards commendation to honor the individual or organization that has contributed the most to the tourism industry over the year.